Grab a cup of tea or a glass of wine and tune in for Inspired Conversations with publisher Linda Joy. On Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern, Linda creates sacred space for leading female luminaries, empowering authors, heart-centered female entrepreneurs, coaches, and healers. A soulful venue where guests openly share the fears and obstacles they've overcome, wisdom and lessons learned, and the personal journey that led them to the transformational work they do in the world. Inspired Conversations to empower you on your path to authentic, soulful living.
Welcome to Inspired Conversations, my friends. I'm your host, Linda Joy, mindset elevation coach, intentional living guide, and publisher of the beloved Aspire magazine. For 17 years, Aspire has continued to inspire, empower, and support women in living deeper, more authentic, and intentional lives. If you haven't claimed your free subscription, and yes, it's still free after 17 years, go to subscribe to aspire.com. It also includes a couple dozen inspirational, transformational digital gifts from our supporters. So again, subscribe to aspire.com. So we're going to be talking today about how to move beyond coping with stresses to transcending them, partly through paranormal means. Because one thing I've learned is we are not alone on this journey, and we are not alone in meeting life's challenges. We always have what I call divine support all around us. And regardless of your situation, spiritual and paranormal resources are here right now for any of us to call on. So I'm excited today to have Reverend Karen Herrick, who completed her master's degree at Rutgers and her PhD at Jungian Institute and University in Social Work. She has shared her clinical expertise for 3 decades in private practice and by lecturing on dysfunctional addictive homes, dissociation, and grief and loss from a Jungian perspective. She's now researching the potential benefits of mediumship, knowing that grief is primarily resolved when the bereaved can recognize their continuing spiritual bonds with the deceased. And ladies, I have my own stories about this, so I'm thrilled to have Karen here with me today. Dr. Herrick's decades of research consists of paranormal experiences that have been widely reported and appear to be fairly common. And Karen, I am so excited to open up the conversation on this topic.
Well, thank you for having me. Me too.
I got to tell you, so you've got decades of research. I always love to start my conversation with my guests because I always feel like they have a catalyst in their own lives that led them to the work they're doing in the world. Did you have such an experience that led you on this path to the work you do now?
I did. I had an experience that I call the Holy Spirit experience, but I was doing some holotropic breath work, which is a clinical process where they have you lay down, listen to music that activates your chakra system, which goes up along your spine. And I didn't know what I was doing. I was told to don't think, just breathe, and then anything could happen. So I was just, doing what I was told. It was like a 5-day retreat, and we did this on the 3rd day. And you're laying there on this blanket, and the music's playing, and feeling all kinds of things in your body. It's just pretty interesting and positive. And all of a sudden, I pulled my feet up, like in the birthing position, and I felt this other breath come into my body. And I thought, whose breath is that? And then I thought, don't think, just breathe. So I just kept breathing, and we both breathed for a while. And at this time, my father was Protestant, my mother was Catholic, and they always stayed like that. And I always thought, growing up in an alcoholic home, that God wasn't really particularly interested in us because it was kind of messy down here. And so I had a belief that there was something that created nature, and it's more like American Indian belief. And the wind was a force, and I would walk in the woods, and I still love nature very much. So that was kind of my spiritual belief, and I wasn't sure about a God. So anyway, after this breath stopped breathing, then I asked my partner to push on my feet, and he wasn't doing it right, and whatever that meant. And then the trainers came over and they got behind me, and one guy said, "Hold on my wrists and just push." And so I was pushing and breathing and had no idea what was going on. And during that, I had the thought, where is my mother? And then I thought, why are you wondering about your mother? Don't think, just breathe. So then when it was over, I had experienced my original birth coming into earth this time. And I'll tell you, it must be easier to go out the other end to die, because coming in is really difficult. Anyway, then you're told not to talk, just stand up. And I stood up, and there were over 20 of us doing this holotropic breath work, and many of them had done it before. This is my first time. And I looked around to everybody, and most of them in the middle of their process. And up until that time, I thought these people were really weird because they believed in reincarnation, and they started telling me about Carl Jung. And anyway, I felt this overwhelming love for them, and that we were connected, so connected, and that we were all connected to everybody on earth. And I knew there was a God. So after that, then we went to lunch. Now, I thought this whole process had taken place in like 20 minutes, but it actually had been 3 to 4 hours. So I had lost connection with time and space. And we went to lunch. Oh, then after that, we had to draw in a mandala drawing, which is a circle drawing. And you just draw whatever comes up to you. So I drew this flower and grass and the sun. And then we went to lunch, because that grounds you to get some food in your system. And then after that, we all sat around with our drawings and explained what happened. So I was listening pretty carefully, and nobody else had a breath that came into them. So I didn't mention that because I felt a little weird, like what just happened to me. And but the professor looked at my drawing and said, "Oh, that's a rebirth drawing. You had a rebirth." Oh, okay. So I didn't want to appear stupid about the breath thing. So that took me about 1.5 years to figure out what had happened to me. And then I knew it was just the Holy Spirit, and that there was a God, and that we were all connected. Then after that, after I got back to my practice, I started getting people with really interesting stories, and I couldn't discount any of them because I had just had this awakening of some sort. So I just started studying it. And like one gentleman, he came to me for a relationship divorce thing, and one day he's leaving the office, and we call this a doorknob issue in therapy. And he said, I leave my body at night, and sometimes I'm afraid I can't get back in. So I said, oh, and I thought they didn't teach us this in social work school. How do you usually get back in? He said, well, I just think about it and you're back in. And that is how, if you're ever outside of your physical body, that is how you get back in. You just think, I want to be back, and you go back. So that's how it all started, kind of.
Well, here's what, this is so interesting, and I love when, thank you for sharing that story. I'm curious because you had such a clinical background, right? So for everyone listen who has that, they have that mind that is very linear thinking, and you're listening to Karen going, what? Karen had she has this strong clinical background, research-based, and had the experience. So how do you talk to those who are like, this is impossible?
Well, usually those that are, this is impossible, don't talk to me directly. They might put on the evaluation later, this sounds a little weird, or this is not true science. Well, it is scientific in that we have so much research for the past 200 years of people writing and spirits coming back and talking through mediums about how this all happens, that we do have research that would hold up in a court of law. And so that's what I tell them. If it's going to hold up in a court of law, that you could prove you had this spiritual experience because of the characteristics, that's enough science for me, because clinical science just holds people back. So I don't want to hold people back. And I know when they tell me these things, it's a head-heart connection. I mean, you were in the now. There was no past, present, or future. You just experienced this beautiful thing. And some people that come in, if they had a near death or an out of body, they're so depressed because they want to stay where they were. So I just, I don't. I think what happens in a lot of my webinars, because I give them on internet, people don't ask much. They're so taken back with what I'm saying, and and I must sound truthful because they're like, oh well, thank you, like thank you for sharing that. Well, you're welcome. But I think that's why I had it, so I could share it.
Oh,
And
I believe that too, Kevin. I believe all our life experiences are like spiritual breadcrumbs leading us to the work or purpose that we have in this life. I know that's been my story.
that's right.
And we're going to take our first break. And when we come back, I want to dive deeper into why you feel it's important that mental health professionals have experience or at least are open to understanding spiritual experiences.
Okay.
We'll be back in a moment. I'm with Reverend Karen Herrick of KarenEHerrick.com. Be sure to swing by her website, check out her book, You're Not Finished Yet, as well as other books, videos. She has so much content there to inspire you on your journey. We'll be right back, my friends.
Connecting you with the best of the conscious minds in the world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Inspiration for a woman's soul. Aspire Magazine, inspiring and supporting women on the path of self-discovery. Claim your free digital subscription today, which includes access to thousands of dollars of personal development bonus gifts from Team Inspiration partners. Claim your Aspire Magazine subscription today at subscribetoaspire.com.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free. AscendingHearts.com.
Consistently attract soulmate clients, begin showing up on brand, monetizing on your calling. Welcome all spiritual coaches, leaders, healers, light workers, and practitioners to a show that turns you on in your business and amplifies your magnetism. I'm host, catalyst, and spiritual business coach Rosalind Fung, and I'm here to journey with you into the juicy and help you discover where the real gaps are. Ignite your mindset and soul with strategies and systems as each episode takes you to the sweet spot that activates your soulgasmic business by tuning in on Tuesdays at 10 a.m. Mountain. Join me for your light language activation and let's magnetize and monetize.
Your conscious lifestyle on steroids. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Welcome back. You're listening to Inspired Conversations. I'm so grateful that you are circling up with me and my special guest, Reverend Karen Herrick of KarenEHerrick.com. So right before the break, I mentioned that I'd love to dive in about your belief that it's important for mental health professionals to have experience with it, or at least be open to the various spiritual experiences. Why do you find that important?
Well, because people that have had it, they're so worried that they could be mentally ill. And for instance, people that have a near death, I understand from statistics that many of them wait at least 7 years before they tell anybody. So if they're going to be in a therapist's office and tell somebody for the first time, I really think it's very important that therapists do, as you say, just have an open mind, even if, it's hard for them to believe. I always think that the clients that are sent to me for a reason. I'm going to learn something and they're going to learn something. So that's really what I try to, explain to all of them. My definition for a spiritual experience would be a transcendent relationship between a person and a higher being that sometimes goes beyond a specific religious affiliation. So they could come in and tell you they talked to an angel, or their deceased mother came to them last night, or they left their body and now they're back in. They can tell you all these different kinds of things. And when they tell you, they are so inspired and in awe. And it just greatly helps them when you can validate that.
Yeah, because their deepest fear is judgment and fear of being labeled.
Yes. And what most therapists don't know is that William James, the father of American psychology, he studied mediumship. He and his wife lost a toddler child, and she went to mediums, and then I think dragged him along, and he met his first medium, Lenora Piper, who he called his White Crow because she was so good. And he and other psychologiist studied her for over 20 years. I mean, how long can you study a person and then just be able to say, hey, she's real? And then Carl Jung, who was known to be spiritual, his mom was a psychic. And he said she was a pretty good mother, except that sometimes she would come out with something during a conversation that had nothing to do with the conversation. And then other times at night when she was alone in her bedroom, you wouldn't go in there and bother her because there are all kinds of noises and voices coming out of there. So, and his grandfather and his second wife talked to his first wife, who was deceased, during lunch. So he got to watch all this. His father was a minister, and he watched all these different levels of consciousness. And no wonder he worked in a mental hospital, because he was trying to figure it out, And he said they happened for a reason, all these different things. And the most important thing was to get the client's story, because when he came in the early 1900s, all you did was get characteristics down, and then you put a label on them. And nobody said, find out what their story is. And he did that. And that's how he developed analytical psychology. And all of his dreams that he went through when Freud kicked him out, because they both had an argument on the unconscious, because Jung said there was more down there than sexuality and repressed feelings from your family, that it had an intelligence of its own. And of course that's where spiritual experiences come from. Your unconscious is the ground where that material comes through. So if they study James or Jung, not the stuff they taught us in universities and college, because they didn't mention that. So that's really a shame,
A shame that they didn't mention mediumship and everything on the other side that is
That's
there.
right. Yeah.
And it's so funny because as I was sharing off air, I've been to mediums before. Some of my dearest friends are well known nationally and internationally. And so I've always been open to that. I think the first one I went to, I was 17. I haven't been in maybe 8 years, but
right.
Some of the other experiences, like I call it my divine support team, right? And 3 times in my life, always when I needed it most, how I received help, guidance, support, whatever word you want to use, was on my darkest days, something would glow. It was this blue aura. It was a building. I'll give one experience.
Okay.
Darkest day, I was deciding whether to take my life. I was having memories of childhood trauma, so I didn't even know what that meant, Right. And so I was driving, Karen, and all of us, I shouldn't have been driving. I was sobbing, and I saw this building glowing blue, like sparkly, shimmery blue. And I just pulled in, and it was an old Victorian house, but I could tell it was an office now, not a home.
Right.
Had a little sign. I opened the front door. I still laugh to this day. And there was 3 doors in front of me when I opened that door. A door straight ahead, French doors to the left, and a door to the right. And I heard, turn left. So I opened these French doors, Karen. There's a fireplace, a sofa, a chair, and some plants. And I sat on the sofa. Now, inside that room was a second door, a wooden door. I was maybe in the room 3 to 5 minutes, and that door opened, and a woman with a clipboard walked in. I scared the living hell out of her because she just walked out of the room and it was empty. And I said to her, if you make me leave, I won't make it through the night.
Oh, gosh.
Wait, and Karen, she was a therapist who specialized in childhood trauma.
Look at that.
Now, here's the funny thing, and there's no accident, I'm sharing this story.
Right.
The healing that happened with her from that relationship. Do you know, I just reached out to her last week, 32 years later, to schedule a session just to say thank you.
Oh,
I see her
wonderful.
next week after 32 years. But that's divine, right? That
Yes.
is what we're talking about. So that happened 3 times in my life, always at the time I needed it most. Now, some would say, well, maybe you think you saw the blue. I'm like, no,
Yes.
I can draw it. Have you ever had people experience that instead of like connections with hearing from the other side?
I've had nurses that tell me that during what they found out later, when a person was in a coma, but they were experiencing a near death, they said there was this blue circle around them.
Wow.
And one of my acquaintances who studies angels, she said that blue is God's favorite color, which I always thought was great.
Yeah, and like I said, it happened 2 times after that. And
Isn't that
then
great?
I'm really curious on this other experience to see your insights, because I've always been open.
Yes.
And we had Dana, my honey, has had a dear friend. I mean, they were extremely close. And this friend had suffered with cancers and beat everything. Boston, he was like the Boston miracle child. This is going back about 15, 20 years.
Okay.
And he made it through one cancer and then it came into his lungs. And they're like, you're gonna beat this. We go on vacation. This man was doing so well on his cancer treatment. He was in the middle of building a house. He called us on the vacation, telling us all about his house. Dana's excited. He says, we'll be home in 7 days. I'll come over because my honey's a contractor and we'll work that issue out.
Right.
Karen, I am driving home from a cross-country trip. Our daughter and my honey are in the very back of the truck, like where the cap is.
Okay.
And they're sleeping. It's 1:30 in the morning. I knew I shouldn't be driving. I was exhausted. But you know, when you're trying to get home from a 30-day vacation, we were cross-country.
Yeah.
I'm driving. I knew I was falling asleep and I hit the meridian and I get emotional sharing this. I heard and felt someone with a very large hand grab my shoulder and say, Linda. And when that woke me up, I twisted the wheel too much and threw them against the back of the truck, but I kept the truck on the road.
Yes.
Of course, they get all upset. We pulled over and I kept pulling down my shirt on my shoulder and looking because I'm like, I can still feel a hand there.
Right.
And I told Dana what happened. And I just had this feeling. I go, someone saved me or us.
Absolutely.
We get home 8 hours later. And you know how you're unpacking. We hit the machine, the voicemail machine, and we're waiting. Yeah, we're just listening to everybody that left messages. And 24 hours before, it was Jeff's girlfriend saying, I'm sorry, Jeff lost his life last night. Sudden turn of events, he died of cancer, right while I was being saved.
Right.
Now, the flip side is he was a blacksmith, Karen. His hands, he used to love to put over my face and cover my whole face. And I can still remember the feel of his hand on me. And
Right.
we have no doubt that it was him who saved us. No
Right.
doubt. Now, are those types of experiences what we're talking about?
Oh, absolutely. That's a beautiful one.
I can still feel it when I repeat the story.
Yes.
I can still feel it. When
Right.
Dana heard the message, he looked at me and said, that was Jeff that saved us.
Yeah.
We knew it was a knowing. And there's other parts of that story that would blow you away that came after, but I want to dive in because those are the kinds of things that you feel people are afraid to talk about in counseling, like personal experiences, because they're afraid of being judged and labeled. Is that what you mean? That
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
There was a young man. He's 29. He came to me because of relationship problems, and he'd broken up with his girlfriend of a long time, and he was afraid, so afraid. So that I took, his assessment material, and he lived with an alcoholic father. And I said, is your father abusive to you? No. Is anybody at work abusive to you? No. I said, well, I said, it's not easy to come to a therapist, but you seem very afraid. So we'll see how you are in the next visit. So he came in the next visit. He was just as uptight. And so I said, I put down my paper and everything. And I said, I have a strong feeling that there's something you're not telling me, and you're trying to get through this relationship therapy without telling me. And so if that's true, could you please tell me? Because I hear some really weird stories here, and we need to be able to trust each other if we're going to do this process. So he said, well, there was this one thing. And his priest told him not to ever tell anybody because they would think he was crazy. I said, okay, well, that's the kind of stories I've heard. So, okay, so let me know what happened. So he said, well, I get home like 10:30 at night from my job. My father's in the kitchen and he's always drunk, and we argue. And he said, but this one night there were some knives on the chopping block, and he threw this knife at me. And he said, now, and this is what James said, they will always say to you, I don't have the words to explain this to you, and you're going to think I'm crazy when I do. But he threw the knife, and this like sheet of plexiglass, although it wasn't plexiglass, came down in front of me, and the knife bounced off of it.
Oh, yeah.
So I said, okay, well, that was some kind of force field. And we could say your guardian angel was responsible for that. And I said, can you, because he said his priest said just to forget it. And I said, can you forget it? He said, no, I can't forget it. And you can't forget these things that happen.
No.
That, like you say, they come right back when you tell the story, and the feelings, because it's a head-heart connection, which is what's so wonderful about it. So I said, but we can't count on that happening again. So I do not want you fighting with your father when there's knives on the chopping block. Just, get a sandwich somewhere and go to bed. And he laughed. He said, okay. And he was so relaxed in the chair after that.
Yeah, because think about it. Because his priest told him not to repeat it, he felt shame and like something was wrong, when really it was a beautiful thing. He was being divinely supported in that moment.
Yes.
That's
and then
sacred,
later on,
right?
when I was getting my PhD, I had a woman, after I gave them a talk, a pre and post test, and then 6 months later I called them to see if they had done anything else, read any more books or whatever on spirituality. And she said, there's something I never put on my form. And I said, really, what was that? She said, well, I was driving back from skiing and, really late at night, and it was really dark on this mountain road. And she said, I kind of dozed, and the car went off to the side. And she said there was a sheet of plexiglass that held me on the mountain.
Yeah.
And I said to her,
I love these stories.
I know. I said, well, I've heard about that plexiglass before. She said, you have? I said, yep. And I said, that's a wonderful story. Thank you for telling me.
Oh, I just love this conversation, Kim. I'm going to take another break. And when we come back, I want to talk about healing the grief process by using psychic mediums, which is what you believe. And I want to hear your thoughts on this, because there's so many layers, and I feel it can give a lot of healing also. So we'll be back in a moment, my friends. I'm with Karen Herrick of KarenEHerrick.com. Be sure to visit her, check out the videos, grab her books, and stay tuned in. We'll be right back.
The best of the holistic, spiritual, and conscious world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Are you feeling the call to unleash your feminine wisdom, hone your empathic gifts, and rise as the goddess you are? You're not alone, my beautiful friend. Crystal Cockerham, spiritual mentor and certified red tent facilitator, trained in both shamanic and priestess practices, works with awakened, empathic women around the world to unlock their shackles of pain, shame, and self-condemnation so they can reclaim their sovereignty and liberate themselves from the world's perceptions. As the founder of Wisdom Awakens and an international best-selling author, Crystal uses her own intuitive blend of spiritual midwifery, and energy healing to support women on their journey of transformation. You'll find supportive guidance and community in Crystal's programs, retreats, and sacred offerings. If you're feeling the call to embrace your feminine power, learn more about Crystal's supportive services at crystalcockerham.com.
More than 24 million Americans have an autoimmune disorder, and that number continues to grow. I'm Sharon Saylor, and I'm one of those 24 million. To put that number in perspective, cancer affects about 9 million and heart disease up to 22 million. That's why I've brought together top experts and those thriving regardless of their diagnosis to bring you the latest, most up-to-date information. Join me, Sharon Saylor, Friday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, for the Autoimmune Hour on Life Interrupted Radio to find out how to live your life uninterrupted.
Hey, hon, what you doing with your phone? Taking pictures?
No, I'm asking it questions.
Like what?
Hey, Bobo, do flowers have best friends?
I'm sorry. I'm afraid I don't know that.
Hey, follow me. I want to show you something. Look, flowers do have best friends.
Whoa.
Some answers can only be found in nature. Discover the unsearchable. Visit discovertheforest.org to find a trail near you. Brought to you by the United States Forest Service and the Ad Council.
Free your mind with OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
You're listening to Inspired Conversations. Thanks for being here today. We are talking about how the paranormal can help us not only cope with stresses, but transcend them. So, Karen, I'm curious on your thoughts about healing the grief process by using psychic mediums, and what led you to that?
Okay, well, I've been to psychics and mediums, and I've got so much good information from them, and I enjoy going. So I I had clients, a couple, especially this one gentleman, who after 9 months he had come down and found his wife dead in the kitchen. So it was completely, immediate, and he was in grief and grief and grief because he felt so guilty. And no matter what we did during 9 months, he was still there, and he had 2 kids that we had to start parenting skills on. So I said to him that I wanted him, I very strongly was recommending that he go see a medium so that he would be able to have his wife speak to him. I said, I can't guarantee you your wife's going to come in, but he had lost his parents a year ago, and his aunt and uncle, his favorite aunt and uncle, 18 months before that. I said, you've got people over on the other side. Somebody's going to come in. I said, I guarantee you. I bet my practice on it. So he looks at me, and after 3 or 4 of these conversations, he realized I wasn't going to shut up. So he went, and he came back in just like that guy in the chair, just completely relaxed. And he sat down and he said, well, they all came in. I said, oh my God, isn't that wonderful? And he said, yeah, and my wife said it wasn't my fault, and all this, and she told us which kid to start on. I said, oh, good, let's do that. And he was just so happy, and from what they all had told him, and now that he knew where they were. So see, he had a connection to them, and that's what they're missing when they're in this grief. And if they have a lot more guilt, which I think, at least with me, most of my male clients have more guilt than women do when their spouse dies. So he needed something to shock him into, they're still there for you. And then he says, I'm not going back. I said, did I ask you to go back? No. I said, you went, you're connected. And one of the things I tell them too is when you go, you find out from your deceased how they would like to communicate with you afterwards. So, is she going to come in a dream, or are you going to go in a meditative state and then ask her to come or him to come? Because it's important that you keep this connection going, just for your health, and also if she wants to, or the person on the other side wants to, because they have lots they want to tell you sometimes.
Yeah, and I have, well, actually, my grandson lost his mom. My grandson's going to be 23. He lost his mom when he was 16, and they were extremely close, and it was sudden. And I know this is one of your specialties. She had addiction, and we had tried everything to help her heal, putting her in recovery numerous times.
Right.
And when she passed, thankfully, he got to go to the hospital as that final decision was being made. And they always had this special song, Karen, and it still comes through. It was called The Climb by Miley Cyrus, about climbing the mountain and overcoming, and it was special to them. And a few weeks later was his 16th birthday, and I said, Ty, why don't you have some friends over? I said, you can keep it intimate, because we used to always have big parties here on the water for him for his birthday. Now, his friend, Karen, had his own phone and a playlist going.
Right.
So they're all down on the beach. We're up on the balcony, and Tyler just came up with me for a moment just to be held, you know? And we're looking down at his friends on the beach, and the song comes on. Now, the owner of that little contraption thing, iPhone or whatever it was, with the playlist said, how the heck is this playing? He said,
Right.
He didn't like Miley Cyrus. He's like, what is this doing on my phone? And Tyler looked at me and he said, my mother's here. I said, yes, she is. And he yells down, he goes, don't touch that. And the kid to this day will say, that is not on my phone. That is not on my playlist. And recently we just saw him, and he's going through some struggles. So we went to visit him, and we sat down at a restaurant and the song came on.
Yep.
3 hours later, we sit down for lunch, the same song comes on, and it's not one of her current songs.
Right.
And tears started coming down his face. I said, do you see you are divinely protected, and she's seeing you, and she's loving you and supporting you? This is what we're talking about, right? That man staying open to receive the signs from his wife. Like Tyler has the music of that song, and they have a couple of the little signs that come through.
That's right.
That's what you mean, staying open to receive and not closing down.
Absolutely. And songs are wonderful because spirits play the music.
Yeah, for him, it's that song, and there's some other little things like a feather, all these little nuanced things. And I can still remember having a personal conversation with the friend I said was a medium. I was not seeing her for mediumship. We were doing a catch-up call because we hadn't seen each other for a year. So she had no idea that my daughter-in-law died because we hadn't seen each other for a year. And Cameron, we're on a Zoom call as friends. And all of a sudden she goes, oh my God, Linda, this woman will not shut up. And I said, do I have your permission? And I said, oh, go ahead. She goes, well, she won't leave me alone, so we'll never get any work done. It was my daughter-in-law coming. And she said, tell Linda, I know she did everything she could for me. I love her. I always felt her love and non-judgment. And tell my son, I never meant to leave him. So here's the funny part. I had this deep insight because I didn't know who that was going to come through.
Right.
But I said, Maureen, can I hit record? Because I didn't know what it was. And what a gift for my grandson, the message. There was more than that. But the message from her to him 6 months after she passed.
Yes.
There's no accidents. There are no accidents. So I love that you're incorporating the work you do with, I guess it's counseling and therapy.
Yes.
Urging this. This is like powerful.
It is very powerful. And those like the feather and birds and coins, all of that is called after death communication, where they're trying to reach you. They're trying to tell you that they're okay and that they're there for you. You know, it's just beautiful.
It is beautiful. And the part is, once you have even a small experience, because to me, they're all important, right?
Yes.
Once you know it, it's almost like,
right.
I took away my fear of death. I'll just say that. It took away the fear I think we all grew up with of dying. I'm like, oh no, I'll continue. My body might not be here, but I'll be here. And I always tell my honey, Karen, I say, we're here together in this lifetime and many others. He's like, why would the divine do that to me? So I always, I go, you know what? I will be watching. So I think, has anyone else ever expressed that experience took away their fear too?
Well, yes. And that's why I always try to teach that death in the family, when they're coming in this grief, is an opportunity for people in this family to have spiritual experiences. And because many times a death will give them something like this. And, you know, if you give them the opportunity, like when grieving people come to me, you know, I always ask, you know, well, you know, Charlie died, and was it, you know, sudden? Was it a long time? Whatever. Get the circumstances, and do they have a picture? And they usually do, because now they have their phones, and so, you know, we talk about Charlie for a little while, and then I say, where do you think Charlie is? And they'll tell me, you know, and they always have a place where he is. And well, that's wonderful. So now you know they believe, right, in some kind of afterlife. And then we talk some more. And then by the end of the session, I'll say, now, I know something about the research that's being done now to get proof that would survive in a court of law about life after death. So sometime during our therapy, would you like to hear about that research? Oh, yes. Yes, they would. So the research that I use now, that's the biggest, other than recommending different books that I think, because now, you know, we've got mediums and psychics that have written books all over the place. And there are lots of different stories that you know, just fit the people who come in. But I tell them about the Bigelow Institute of Consciousness Studies in Las Vegas. Have you heard about them?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so it's BICS, BICS.org. And Robert Bigelow is a billionaire, and apparently he lost a wife and a child, and maybe even a grandchild. You don't know much about him, except in 2021, there was an article in the New York Times. He was going to give away $1 million to researchers who could prove to him through research that would stand up in a court of law that there was an afterlife. So somebody sent me the article from the New York Times, and I never even saw the second half of it. And they said, Karen, this looks like you should do this. So I applied. There were 1,300 people that applied for the application, and 204 people 8 or 9 months later put in a paper up to 25,000 words with their opinion and their stories and their proof of what afterlife would be. And then in November, there were 29 winners, and he spent $1 million to $2 million in giving prizes. Now, I didn't win, which I didn't think I would win, because I don't belong to a university. You know, I'm just here by myself. But I've enjoyed getting all their emails, and anybody can go on BICS.org and read any of those 29 research papers. You can download them, and they're going to put them in a book, I'm sure. But that kind of research is going on as we speak. So now they're just continuing asking for, you know, different kinds of research papers proving life after death. And then there's also Netflix has a show that's called Surviving Death. It's been out for about 2 years. Have you seen that?
No, I haven't.
Okay,
I'm
so
writing this all down.
Yeah, that has 5 one-hour shows, and the first show is on near-death experience. And if somebody has lost someone, I ask them just to go on and watch the first show, because a lot of the other stuff isn't pertinent right now in the beginning of, you know, their grief. But anybody can watch all 5 if they want to, but shows different kinds of paranormal experiences and what happens to people. But the first show shows all PhDs who have had near-death experiences, and so they tell you what it's like. And we really should be all studying just to know what a near-death is like, because that is what it's like to go to the other side. So they're telling you what it is like to so-called die, which is not death at all. Like you said, you just go to a different place, and we can't talk anymore, but if I'm on the other side, I can send you thoughts.
Yeah. And it's like, it's not just thoughts too. It's these, like the songs, everything. It's like like every time that happens, it's this piece of love.
Yes.
It shows that love continues. And so where I personally never had a fear of dying myself. My fear was always leaving the little ones behind. Like now my daughter's 38 and I have grandchildren, but it was always the fear of abandoning them.
Right.
And then when I realized, is like, oh no, I will still be here. I will still be watching over. They can't experience me in the physical, but that doesn't mean I'm not there with them. I can't see them. I can't guide them and support them. So I talk about all that. Like I said, my grandson's 23. He knows if something ever happens to me, you'll get a sign, baby.
That's good. That's what my second book is about. It's called Grandma, What is a Soul? When my grandson, my last grandson, because I have 8 of those, he said, Grandma, I don't like to talk about this very often. He was in the car and he said, but I don't want you to die. And now we had never talked about that, but I thought, oh, this is interesting because he's really scared. So I said, well, I'm really not old enough to die, but when I die, when I get really, really old, my soul will come back and I'll watch over you. So he said, Grandma, what is a soul? So then I had to explain it. And after 25 minutes, he wasn't scared anymore. And so we put it into a little book, and there's a section for parents in the back, but it's a kid's book that really explains where people go that you love.
That's a powerful gift to the world. So can you say the name of it again so they know?
Sure. Grandma, What is a Soul?
I love that. What a great book, because I can remember our granddaughter, who's 11 now.
Right.
She's an empath and a sensitive. I remember her, I got sick a couple of years ago. I had an emergency situation, and it was touch and go, June 2 years ago. And I remember her look when they finally allowed her to come visit me.
Right.
And and my daughter said, I know they're not supposed to let children in at that ICU. And I said, oh, she's coming. Because I knew if she could physically see me and connect with me through my eyes,
yes,
she would feel peace. It was different than me trying to FaceTime or call her. And that's what happened. She walked in and she goes, you're still here. I said, baby, I'll always be here. I will always be here. But it was that her fear of losing me.
Right.
And us being able, so that's a beautiful book. I am going to get that for my granddaughter, and there's a couple other children I know. So thank you for bringing that one up. We still have another 5 minutes or so. I want to talk about, you have other books too. So tell us about your most recent book, and then you also have the book You're Not Finished Yet.
Yes, the most recent book is The Psychology of the Soul and the Paranormal. And it talks about William James and Carl Jung and all the things you never heard in school about them and mediums. And there's a chapter about a woman who came to me and was seeing negative spirits under her bed at night. She had prayed for 90 days for God to change her life, and that's what happened. And she's got my name off the internet, she said, and her positive spirit said I would help her. So I was her therapist for about 1.5 years, I think. And I didn't charge her because I was being asked by an organization in 9 months to talk about mediumship. And I'd already given a lecture on the history of it. And I thought, now what am I going to talk about? So I said, I'm going to use your case, whether you turn out to be a medium or not, to explain some of the things that is happening to you. And so that's what Psychology of the Soul is about. And there's illustrations there showing your vagus nerve. It's the 10th and longest nerve in your body. And it's a highway where your spiritual experience, your spiritual body, you have 2 bodies, a physical body and a spiritual body. And St. Paul in the Bible says you come in on the physical and you leave on the spiritual, which is how it happens exactly. And that spiritual body is driven by the soul. And when it's time for you to go to the other side, something happens with around the ears. So they say they hear this whirring noise and everything goes counterclockwise, I think, the way they explain it. And the highway, the vagus nerve vibrates, and using the chakra system and the spinal column, and you just go right up out the top of your head. And but now people are doing that with near death and out of body. So there are people that go up and come back, and they can tell us all about that. So I have that in that book. And then the book, You're Not Finished Yet, that I wrote probably 20 years ago about coming from an alcoholic or dysfunctional family. And that's where your emotional needs were not met because your parents were busy trying to survive and doing other things. And the characteristics you have from that. And, people that come from dysfunctional families, they don't know how to parent. And they sometimes don't know how to have relationships because they never saw really a good one. So that's about all those characteristics from alcoholic or dysfunctional families. And then at the end, the last 2 chapters are on spirituality.
Such powerful offerings, my friend. And you're the director of the Center for Children of Alcoholics in New Jersey?
Yes, that's my private practice. And now I'm working part-time. and then teaching on the internet to other therapists.
What a gift. What a gift, because you're educating families on the disease concept of alcoholism, but also you see all types of people with psychological problems, including addictions, and you merge all of the spiritual principles in. That's so powerful.
Yeah, it is for them. And not everybody, I tell people on my other therapists on the internet, not everybody wants to hear about spirituality. So you just got to be careful with that. But because some people, because I am in New Jersey on the East Coast, will say, well, I'm Catholic. And oh, good. I'm glad that's working for you. And well, even then we can talk about the guardian angel, and there's certain things you can talk about. But sometimes what that means is, I know you do other things that I don't want to talk about that, which is fine. So they come too, and we do parenting or whatever they need to be done. But most people, they'll come in and say, Karen, I know you like weird things, so I have a story, and they'll tell me a story.
Yeah,
and then we'll get to what it is they're there for.
Yeah, they found a safe space to share. And I think it's beautiful that you're also helping train other therapists on this, on integrating this into their practice, because it's such a powerful gift to bring the whole being into the therapy practice.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, I'm trying.
You're doing it, my friend. You're doing it. And I just love this conversation, Karen. I'm so grateful that you joined me. Thank you. Thank you. We're going to be running one of your articles in the upcoming April-May issue of Aspire magazine. So I'm excited to share. It's about spiritual experiences. So thank you again for that. I look forward to sharing your wisdom on that platform too.
Oh, that'll be great. Oh, I didn't know you were running one. Oh, I'm glad.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that'll be fun.
And until next time, my friends, choose love, choose joy, and choose happiness. Blessings, everyone.
Thanks for listening to Inspired Conversations with publisher Linda Joy. Join our sacred space every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern and meet leading female visionaries, empowering authors, heart-centered female entrepreneurs, coaches, and healers. Inspired Conversations with Linda Joy is a soulful venue where guests share the obstacles they've overcome, along with wisdom and lessons learned on their personal journey that led them to the transformational work they do in the world. Inspired Conversations to empower you on your path to authentic and soulful living.